Welcome, everyone, to What the Force, and welcome to our show to cover the Andor series, which my good friend Alex Kane, who is joining me, named Andor Declassified. Normally, you come up with the good names.
Oh, I don't know about good ones, but yeah, it just felt right. I think I did a Twitter search and nobody had tweeted that phrase yet, so I was like, okay, I think it's fair game.
I like it. It's good. So we are going to be talking about the first 3 episodes of Andor on this episode, and we'll be doing an episode every time they release an episode. I think it'll be pretty fun, so you'll get more of us. This show, starting out, was wow. I totally agree with the need to release the first 3 episodes together, kind of like a mini movie to start off the season. Yep. It definitely needed the space to establish itself, because one thing about this, and I'm going to say it's a new world in a way, the world of Andor, is that it expands Star Wars and also makes it feel incredibly lived in.
Yes, 100% agree. It just kind of throws you in. It's that very grimy, like Solo texture, and it's sort of incidental that it's the Star Wars universe in some ways. Like for a while, you're just kind of like, this could be anywhere, Yeah. And it just works because it's very character driven. There's a lot of, motivational drama with like characters wanting things and needing things. And, there's a MacGuffin, but there's a lot more than that. These characters feel very fleshed out and human and believable. Yeah. It's really fun.
And everything is driven by human desires, and it feels very real. Like people live here, and what I absolutely loved about the establishing episode and the follow-up 3 is that it was very, very clear with its themes, but it didn't tell you them directly. Nobody said these things out loud, but it was very, very clear with how the characters interacted and what they were saying, even though we haven't even mentioned the word of rebellion or, that, maybe some people want to live differently.
Yeah, there's a lot of trust in the audience in this one. And that is like really refreshing and just, nice to see in Star Wars. Something that's like, not necessarily more adult, but a more mature audience in mind. And it's kind of like if we put like BBY5 at the beginning of the episode, maybe not everyone knows what that means, but like they sort of trust that you do, or that if you don't,
you can Google it.
You'll be like, well, that's kind of cool. I wonder what that means. And it doesn't just sort of, just kind of announce every little thing. It's just kind of like,
I did appreciate that they named all the planets when they went there the first time.
Yeah.
That was very Rogue One of them, which follows the theme of what they're doing, which is to entirely lead into the opening moments of Rogue One. Yeah. Right? How did he get to that moment? And you had some thoughts on that before we kind of get into maybe the style of the show and like what we're...
Are you talking about the prequel stuff in terms of?
Like we're here to see Cassian become who he becomes in Rogue One, and we get like all of this backstory about him, but it really leans into the why we're telling this story.
Yeah, there's a common sentiment. It's not unique to this show. It's kind of anytime there's like a prequel or something, that people are like, well, we kind of know where this ends up, so why should I care? And like, your subjective response to a work of art is always going to be individual to you and unique, and valid because it's your experience. But this got me thinking about one of my favorite fictional characters in one of the final episodes of my favorite TV show pretty recently. And I didn't hate it, And I think it's interesting when that happens, where some, really careful, thoughtful, skilled storytellers who love their characters kill him.
Mhm.
And I think it's comes down to, for me, like, I think about Cassian Andor and Jyn Erso, and I'm like, they had a pretty good death in Rogue One. Like, it served this really heroic function where it wasn't just, I'm going to do my one good deed to redeem myself from my past and then die because I deserved to die or something like that. It was, this very heroic, selfless thing that had a butterfly effect across the galaxy and led to better things. And I think when a character death is handled well,
there's an appreciation for how the character was handled, and that, there is sort of a feeling of understanding of the sacrifice in that movie, which is really important. I know there's been a lot of interviews where they've talked about like how gritty or where he's at and how, he's not quite who he is yet in Rogue One, right? And how he kind of transforms and learns. And what I find super fascinating is it's almost thematically on point with what Kenobi was missing, as he is stuck where he is stuck in his journey, which is fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt that this show does a lot with the, it's not like there was a ton of characterization in Rogue One because it's sort of a very fast-paced thing that has to, sort of connect certain dots. But like they took what is there of Cassian, and already in these 3 episodes, we see so much of that unpacked. And, I think I was really shocked the first time I watched Rogue One, and that guy's like, oh, I'm injured. I can't climb over the wall. The stormtroopers are going to get me. And he sort of ruthlessly kills him because, and it's like, here we see not quite that version of Cassian, nor the sort of heroic, selfless Cassian at the end of Rogue One. We get sort of, the first step in that evolution from like sort of hardened James Bond killer who would just like off the guy who's going to like rat him out to the Empire. Here he's a little bit messier and kind of clumsy, but good-natured. And I just really like the complexity of the character right out of the gate.
Yeah, and also that it's very clear the things that he wants, at least, or what he thinks he wants, right? And it also shows him to be a very competent individual from the get-go, which is awesome too. Yeah
Tony Gilroy, he wrote the Bourne trilogy, Bourne Identity and Supremacy and Ultimatum, and I watched the first one the other night, and there's so much of the beginning of that movie in this introduction where he's like, he's this hyper competent, sort of like this guy who's like basically really dangerous. But it's like, it's that trope of I don't want
broken.
to. I don't want to hurt anybody. I just,
broken and, kind too.
But it's like by crossing paths with him, you may die just by by messing with him. And it's not like he wants that consciously, but it's a fun trope that they played with.
I thought it was really, really interesting when I was doing research on this before the show aired that we have a really solid mix of sort of American writers mixed with British television directors. And these directors come from things like Doctor Who and Sherlock and other BBC programming that is automatically longer format. We think about like Sherlock episodes and sometimes they're like 2 hours and, things like that, right?
Yeah.
And seeing that we got Toby Haynes, who directed the first 3 episodes, it's kind of like a mini arc in some ways. And I wonder if it's going to follow more of that style where like a director has a chunk of an arc. Because this is definitely an arc that we experienced with these 3 episodes. They work best together.
Yeah, I agree. And I've avoided spoilers for like, I know that people have seen the 4th one, but I think it's embargoed or something. But it's fun to think about like, okay, so where are they going to go with that? But this did feel pretty complete. It felt, he's off on his adventure. He's sort of, running off with his Obi-Wan Kenobi figure. And,
oh my God. Yeah, I was going to get into that. But
we've got a lot of ground to cover. But yeah, there's a lot of fun Star Wars in this,
Yeah.
It works its way into that.
Like right off the top, I really am obsessed with the anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist themes that we get right off the top. And with that there's a police abolition, theme that's simmering in the background, as well as the police support capitalism and imperialism. And it's fascinating.
Yeah, this is not a watered down, very fine people on both sides kind of show.
No.
It has a viewpoint, and it made a decision to make the villains of these 3 episodes basically like Blue Lives Matter dipshits, basically.
And also hyper-capitalist, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
These planets are like Priox Morlana, which we've only really seen in novels, I think, the corporation-run planets.
Yeah, it's very similar to like the Zerka Corporation from like the
Master and Apprentice.
Master and Apprentice,
Mm-hmm.
That idea of like the corporations being like serving as a government, which is a very cyberpunk thing, and
it is. There's a lot of cyberpunk in the like vibes of the show.
Yeah, they call them corpos constantly.
Corpos, yeah, and then they call the planets that are under them, but are run sort of informally, affiliates, which is like super corporate too.
Yes, I caught that affiliate. That's good.
Yeah. And what I love about this is that it's a sort of large theme of how capitalism and imperialism through the empire are hand in hand and best friends with each other. And how, with the exception of TLJ and Canto Bight, we've never really explored.
Yeah, certainly not in like the big like tentpole Star Wars stuff
on a show.
Yeah,
like the last time we talked about this was TLJ, and it is gonna be hard for some typically angry fans on the internet. They're already struggling with just the fact that people of color exist in this show, including the guy who the show is named after. But this is going to be a very, very on the nose story. The cops, the essentially security guards for the corporation, are, shown to be corrupt. And some of them aren't, sure, but they're helping the bad guys. And it's like a microcosm of what we're going to get with the Empire.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this interesting decision to like characterize them like your typical Star Wars villains, but instead it is, just capitalists who, lay down their lives for
money.
These corporate jobs, yeah.
And
it's very fun.
The uniforms themselves mimic the Empire's uniforms, even the hats. Like, they look very imperial in design, but they come with this uneasy psychological color palette of teal and orange, which, if it's used in a movie, a teal and orange filter makes you feel anxious.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And these guys are not fully competent, like...
Yeah, most of them aren't, yeah.
Yeah, like we get a mix of corrupt security cops, and we get a mix of the guy who seems like he's trying to do the right thing, but like is also extremely underprepared to do anything and doesn't know what he's doing. He thinks he's doing the right thing.
Right. Yeah, because his superiors are just like, we're going to ignore this because we want to, have a good like PR look, and then he's like, but they were murdered, as if...
Yeah. Yeah, as if they weren't actually corrupt, which the chief inspector pointed out.
Yeah.
And then it also is interestingly, and, I was going to go in this later, but I think it's good because it ties into the themes that are present throughout. It's specifically poking at, I think, the UK police force. some of the one security guy that joins him on the mission.
Oh yeah, the Scottish fellow who's like the second in command.
Yeah, he literally is Linus Mosk. He's literally like a caricature of a police officer, like a Bobby.
I definitely kept getting the sense that this story could take place in 2022 or it could take place in like Victorian times, like simultaneously. It's showing us how
universal.
Yeah, universal and timeless, but also like how we've kind of reverted to like, that horrible like industrialization period, with Cassian's backstory and also.
And thank you for bringing up the industrialization, because we get another instance of our glorious mine symbolism.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right? We get our amazing mine symbolism, which you're very familiar with because I bring it up every single time we see it.
Yeah.
We have the wonderful line from Solo, right? Which is like, mining colonies are the worst. Yeah, well, the worst is where the money is. And, the symbolism is consistently the dark side and consumption and how these things are interconnected and tied to the Empire is that the Empire needs to be burning up the universe basically to continue to control it. That's its only option to basically exist.
Yeah.
And we'll get into like the specifics of how it plays out when we get to that episode. But also Ferrix is also, got some interesting things thematically with what's going on with it. The corporation planet is also really interesting. I love the world already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of texture here, like the practical sets and the like the complexity of them. Kind of you can kind of see the budget on the screen. It really pays off with like when they're at somebody's apartment or whatever. Like it all just looks so like lived in, like you said, very kind of like Bilbo's house in Lord of the Rings or something. Like this is kind of a world that we buy. When we see it, it rings true.
Yeah, exactly. They did a lot of work to fill in and make it seem like every background character had a life, had a full life that it existed for it.
Yeah, there's like no character who feels like, oh, that's just some random, like every character felt equally fleshed out. And I mean, you've got the bell tower guy with the hammers, like, that's the perfect example of how just every performance in this is just like giving its all. And every character is so just colorful, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Any other big themes that you noticed in this?
Yeah, I mean, well, like the mining and the flashbacks going hand in hand. And then we sort of see like parallels in the present of that. And
there's something going on with Ferrix itself. Like there's something really interesting symbolically happening.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the talk of the reckoning and the tolling of the bell, again, that felt very like Victorian to me.
Yeah.
Like, there's something timeless and unique with that. A bell to me is, connotes like a church, almost like they're going to do the hope thing without constantly like bludgeoning us with the word hope and just kind of doing it, in I think that would be kind of cool to see, like, how we lead into Rogue One that way, kind of just like show all these different illustrations of how that works in sort of a nitty gritty capitalist world that, is oppressed in a believable way.
Yeah, exactly. And, pulling thematically from Victorian culture and like how people lived or what happened gives us a very realistic base to kind of tell stories of oppressed people, and again, imperialism and capitalism are going to go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's dig into the story itself.
Sure.
We start out in this in this like rainy city, which again felt very cyberpunk. That like just the lights and the, you know, the bubbles that he passes with people in them and different aspects like that, which is also something we haven't really felt in Star Wars before. A little bit, maybe in Coruscant and the underworld there, but it felt like a new take on it, which was fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those little bubbles, like, I don't know if they were supposed to be like VR booths or something, but it felt fresh. And even just like the lights of the docks or whatever that he was walking down, it just felt very
the passing of the
distinctive.
Lights.
Yeah.
That was really cool effect. And then seeing like the long path towards the city. Yeah. It also felt a lot like Baraka, which we've seen before in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It's the city you start out with. But the cities kind of are all, it feels like the cities are getting this like cyberpunk treatment in Star Wars, which I'm not against because it's going to lean into that, right? But we haven't seen a lot of cities in Mandalorian, and we only saw our first one in Boba Fett. And so it's nice to see television versions of cities in Star Wars.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So we get this rain stuff happening. And of course that means that our main character there's something wrong. He's emotionally sad.
Yeah.
And we instantly get the answer to that in that he is seeking his sister.
Yeah.
So he's missing.
He goes into a club. Yeah.
He seeks out women to start, right? Because he goes into this club, which is a brothel, and they actually use that word later, which I was like, what?
Yeah. There's like sexuality in this Star Wars. It's kind of interesting. It's yeah.
Oh my. Where are we? What?
There's like company and people putting on pants. Like, what's going on?
I am so happy that we are actually getting this in Star Wars. This can exist in Star Wars, Alex.
Yeah, it's cool. It feels, you know, whole and like authentic, you know, to the the characters feel like human beings instead of you know, just kind of like, well, we have to keep it clean, you know. It feels like, you know, it could be just a sci-fi show, but it happens to be that thing we already love, you know, which is kind of a cool order of operations, I guess. Like, you know, if it wasn't Star Wars, I would still love it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to get Force users in this. So what is the galaxy really without access to Force users? And this is the period of time where we're just not going to see them very often.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, yeah.
So yeah, he goes into the brothel, which is quite, from a psychological perspective, literally where you go when you don't have a connection with your inner feminine, and you're looking for somebody to make you feel connected to your inner emotions. And he seeks his missing feminine, which is his sister, which is wild. What are you doing, Tony Gilroy?
Yeah.
So yeah, this is where I said this is calling back to what Kenobi is missing, and he didn't know he was missing, right? He finds Leia in the Kenobi show, and we see that Cassian is also seeking something like that, but he knows what's missing. And he runs awry these mall cops, not really getting the answers that he needed, right?
Yeah.
The dirty security guards basically who want to shake him down, and he kills them. This feels full circle from a Rogue One perspective, I think.
Yep. He finds out that someone from his home world was there working, but yeah, the woman who comes over to talk to him says, like, you know, they don't use their real names, so he doesn't have much to go on, but he gets that little tidbit that, you know, she could have been there. And
then we get the introduction to Ferrix, which is sort of... What did you think of where Cassian ended up? Knowing the context of where he is, what did you think of where he was when we get introduced to like B and the planet?
Yeah, I mean, we don't see his mother, his adoptive mother, for a while, right?
Yeah. Do you know where he is? Do you know where he is?
the first time we see him, he's on the ship with the droid? Is that what you mean?
This ship, this specific ship is in a junk pile. So it's buried.
Yeah.
And it's the ship that takes him away from Kainai.
Oh, it's the same one.
It's the same
that she
ship
brought him in on.
That she brought him in. So he's literally like incubating in a womb.
Fascinating. Yeah, they sort of flash back and forth, and it's like it looks different, but I was like, I'm pretty sure it's the same.
It's just like worn down, right?
Spiffed up earlier. Yeah, right.
Yeah. But that's where he goes back to when he wants to like be alone.
Right. This is like a guy who's looking for like that link to where he comes from, because I think he has a lot of guilt that we can talk about later. But he's sort of like was sort of whisked away from his past, and he's, of course, like Star Wars is like this metaphor for adolescence traditionally, right? With like Luke or Kylo or Rey. And so you can look at it like that too, that he's somebody who is headed very rapidly for like sort of adulthood, maturity and stuff, but his childhood was sort of stolen from him.
Yep.
For his safety, but yeah.
Just a brief aside before I get into like what's going on with Cassian. It's awesome, but B is like my favorite thing in existence. I love
such a great droid, yeah.
I love him. I love how he moves. I love how much character they're able to get with the animatronics and the puppetry.
Yeah.
And I love his little stutter. It makes him instantly endearing and relatable, and he cares for Cassian and he cares for Marva, and he feels like every good droid, which is part of the family. And they talk about how lies work for droids, which I'm obsessed with, that it takes more energy to create a lie in a droid's head. And I'm dead. This is like, I'm obsessed. This literally like made me so happy. I was like, you're adding to droids? You're making new things that I never knew about droids. Maybe I've talked about droids too long, but I'm obsessed with this droid. He's great.
He is great. And we learned that Cassian's name as a child, his real given name is Kassa, right? With a K. And the droid calls him Kassa when he wants to really like get his attention, which is adorable.
Yeah.
Like you have the sense of history that they grew up together, quote unquote. And I thought that was beautiful. And of course, there's like a lot going on in these 3 episodes with the idea of lying and like covering your tracks and robbing Peter to pay Paul, as they say. Like Cassian is a guy who's the scaffolding of his life is kind of rickety. He's kind of jumping out of the plane and building the parachute on the way down day after day in his search for whatever his sister symbolizes to him. And it's funny. He is a mess, but he's got the mother that he can go home to, and he's got these friends.
And we get this like transition into his like inner psyche through this dream of the past, right? So they're doing a flashback, but in some ways we get the impression that this is like inside of Cassian's head.
Yeah.
Right? And like what he's going through, like he's gone into this ship that took him away from his home. So it's like as close as he can be to his home planet and that space. And we look around and it's like a small village of teenagers.
Yes. Like if you think about it for any amount of time, you're like, there are no adults here.
Yeah.
What happened to them? And then you see the mining operation, and there's like fighting going on, and the crashed Confederate like separatist ship, and like just all this chaos. And you're like, it has that feel of like the Lost Boys from Peter Pan or something. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
I was thinking like Lord of the Flies a little bit. There's episodes of like Star Trek where they run into a ship and all of the like the entire ship is like kids. Like it's a very classic sci-fi trope to be like, there are only teenagers.
Yep.
This is a community made up of people who have yet to become adults, i.e. the entire I mean, previous story of Star Wars, which is how to become an adult. None of these kids have become adults. I mean, I think the eldest one looked maybe 15, 16, right? And Casa himself looks solidly preteen.
Yeah, and of course I went back to that Rogue One quote about when I was 6 years old, and I was like, he looks older than 6, but I mean, maybe he's supposed to be 6, I don't know, but yeah, he looks very young.
Yeah, his sister looks 6.
yeah, he looks more like 10 or 11 or something, but yeah.
And we get this just like really fascinating view. Like, it looks like they're all wearing clothes that are too big for them, that have been cut down or like, strapped on. It definitely gets the vibe of like all the adults are dead. This is our culture. They're
all very like earthly colors, like green and orange and brown, like and
burnt sienna, yellow. Yeah. Really cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it's using the golden rule of show, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many questions you have about this right off the bat. And you're like, well, they do answer them, but they don't answer them fully. And it's really, I think, quite an exceptional challenge for some traditional Star Wars audiences.
Yeah, it's very much something that's playing the long game, like a sort of Game of Thrones or some of the more mundane, like prestige dramas, like Better Call Saul. Like they're, it's 3 episodes, it's 2 hours. It feels like a lot, but you don't get all the answers. And I'm like, am I imagining this? There's like so many like fun little questions that I have just like in every scene almost. You're like, I wonder if, and of course we have a long ways to go.
Yeah.
Like 21 more episodes over the course of 2 seasons. But yeah, it's a really fun start.
It is. Yeah. And then we get kind of more of an introduction to the people of the planet. We get the shot of the gloves and Brasso. We can also tell it's not written by Jon Favreau because we hear everybody's names at least twice.
Yeah. There's a lot of proper nouns in this show.
It's wonderful. People call each other by names.
Yeah. Yep.
They use those names multiple times so you remember them. Any thoughts on the planet, the gloves, the wall of gloves?
Well, I loved the gloves image. That just to me screams like, oh, this is a show with like a class consciousness, and that cares about like working class sort of like average Joe characters, which is beautiful. And you don't always get that in Star Wars. Even the best of Star Wars, sometimes it's like, well, you have like that little boy from Tatooine, and then you have the monks and the aristocrats and the queen, and and then you have like, well, whatever. But I really like that. It's just kind of like, that notion of a
hard day's work is respected in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I mean, we got a little of that with Obi-Wan at the whale fish market thing, or
sand manta ray.
Yeah, that was cool. But I like this idea too that heroes are everyday people who do kind, invisible acts that aren't, you don't always steal the plans to the Death Star and sacrifice your life to stop the Empire and make everything better in an instant. That's not every day. Sometimes there's a lot in this series that resonates with like history, with frankly like Nazi occupied Germany, or things in the newspapers today. And it's like it's really beautiful how kind of tastefully it's all done.
There's a feeling in the show by just how they're presenting the city as a community, and that there's a communal understanding that they look out for each other that comes through in the symbolism of the gloves. Oh, can you grab my gloves for me? The bell ringing that happens later on in these 3 episodes. There's a sense that people actually care, and that it's it's itself a city of generally people who are just trying to get by, but also understand the social contract that they have with each other. The idea that, what we owe to each other.
Yeah. There are two characters or two little scenes, that really stick out to me in these 3 episodes. And one is the friend that he owes money to, who is like trying to like basically stand up for himself and say, hey, it's time to pay me up, pay up what you owe. I'm not just going to like let you do this. And then the character of Tim is also an interesting one because, you have these moral gradations in this show.
Yeah.
That feel very fascinating, where he's like sort of a jealous boyfriend figure. He's doing a little stalking. He's a snitch who does something very bad.
Yeah.
But then when he dies, we feel bad. It's a show that is not stormtroopers versus Jedi,
Yeah.
That's what it comes back to, is like, it is not Indiana Jones punching a Nazi officer. It is very gray in a beautiful, colorful way.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's got a lot of vibes of, I think the show was Hello Hello, which is like Nazi occupied France, and this like tavern that was operated and ends up getting involved in the resistance with like the Nazi occupied France, and like just the inn owner who's just like trying to get away and have affairs on his wife. Like, it's just like, like how do you live normally under an occupied or an imperialistic culture?
Yeah.
It's really, really, really interesting how they're playing everything out to be like, well, this is how we exist in this, right? And it feels very real. So, great stuff. Conversely, we get like more of a solid introduction to kind of the bureaucracy of this capitalistic planet. This is also a very cyberpunk concept that like corporations are governments.
Yeah.
And the chief inspector, which is also like a very British thing to pull into, which is really interesting.
And he's the guy with like the giant Civil War mustache too, right?
Yeah, yeah. But he knows, he can foresee the consequences of making a big deal out of this.
Yeah.
He sees that Priax Morlina, if it makes a big deal and causes a kerfuffle, the Empire is just going to come in and take over.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
The nail that sticks up gets hammered down or whatever.
Exactly. And he's like, these guys were terrible. We were doing bad things. We're not supposed to have brothels. They weren't supposed to be into the expensive brothel because they can't afford that on their salary. So they're obviously on the take. And, they shouldn't have been drinking the drink we shouldn't have had in the first place because they couldn't afford it. And we're not supposed to have it. What about this, more absolute thing that we're not supposed to have been doing makes you think we need to find justice for these guys? It's fascinating. And the script and how it's written is so snappy and smart and detailed in its just lining up. Do you not understand that we will be stomped because of all of these things I just laid out, but you want to go and find justice for these obviously terrible people?
Mm-hmm.
Wild.
Yeah. It reminds me of Brian Cox's character in The Bourne Identity, where, it's like, we need to clean up this mess. We can't, the worst thing that could happen is somebody writes about us in the newspaper and all the terrible things that we do every day behind closed doors, so it's like, we can't let the public know that these cops essentially are no better than the guys that they try to shake down. And
yeah. And worse than that, he's trying to keep the rest of the employees happy too, right? This is something we just have to sweep under the rug. Literally, that's what they're trying to do. Because the large consequences are bad, if the Empire comes in, and B, the small consequences of reputation of the corporation is bad for the employees. And I love how he's like, yes, they died in a regrettable misadventure, something semi-heroic, but they died in a fight, that sort of thing. And I loved him because he's such a pragmatist about the situation that he is in, and he's just trying to survive, and he's trying to do what's best for the organization, which, again, if it becomes a tall flower, the Empire's just like, stop being a tall flower. That's now a mine. Like, literally we'll just take everything and strip mine it. Conversely, we get, is it Cyril? Cyril is his name. We never actually hear it. Do we hear it?
Are you talking about the main villain?
Yeah.
I don't remember his name at all. I remember most of the names, but his I don't remember.
It's Syril. That's what it is in in IMDb.
Okay.
And I don't think we actually hear his name out loud. The entire...
Okay. Gotcha.
So we have him, he's like, no, this is wrong, right? We get he's like trying to become an imperial officer, and he doesn't even know that that's an option.
Yeah. As soon as I heard the line where the inspector says, like, have you modified your uniform, son? And he's like, yes, sir, just a little bit, or something like that.
Yeah.
That exchange, I was like, this guy desperately wants to be, like a General Price, a Hux type, somebody.
Yeah.
He's not content working for, the corporation, but
he's an officer, but also he doesn't know what the hell he's doing because he gets like super nervous. Like these little moments where he gets nervous before he goes and talks to like the people he's got to go and yell at are really, really priceless. Like he's never done this before. He's never been in power because the chief inspector's always been around, and he just sort of like does what the chief inspector wants him to do. And now it's his chance because the boss is away.
Yeah, he's taking charge, and it's a big power trip to just prove himself. Yeah, because I guess he doesn't, where Cassian has this sort of internal thing that he's seeking in his past and his family and whatnot. Like, this is a guy with like no regard for any of that. He wants that status, I guess, power.
Yeah, I think he's doing it under this guise of like, I'm the best person to lead.
Yes.
My good friend Laura on Twitter said he's got big Karen energy.
Yeah. The parallel that I unfortunately kept having in my head was like the whole Kyle Rittenhouse nonsense where like, I'm not any authority figure, but I'm a young fascist with money, so I'm going to take an assault rifle to like a protest and just be a vigilante, just somebody who's like, I believe myself to be like a cop, even though, like, he's just some corporate stooge with a nice uniform.
Yeah. I heard a lot of people describe him as Javert as well. Not like I didn't come up with that, but I totally see it from Les Miserables, the like police officer who is constantly trying to track down the fugitive, right? Even though he only stole a loaf of bread. Not that this wasn't a bigger crime. Sure. Yes, murder is
just a little casual murder, it's fine.
Just a little bit. But also they might have shot him first too. Like that's the kind of bad situation that Cassian was in.
And it feels like an accident, I think.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
It's not quite clear, but yeah.
Yeah.
The second one was less of an accident, but yeah.
Defo purposeful. Yeah. But, it's just really interesting that we have this kind of like, I think, like the best term that I can come up with is like capitalist toady. Like he believes in this weird environment so much he's willing to just literally not see anything else.
Yeah, like a militant bootlicker. Like, man, he just loves that boot. Yes.
But it's not even like the boot because he's not super respectful to the chief inspector's orders. He is militant to the corporation.
Sure, yeah.
And like a sycophant corporation. Like he's memorized the employee handbook and all the policies.
Yeah, the first thing that does get telegraphed in the show to the audience is Cassian says to the owner of the club, or the girl working the club, is this is a company town. Like that's the thing that, is like rule number one, so it's interesting, it's that's a thing, from history again and again, and we always kind of know how it goes. Elon Musk has talked about wanting to make like a Tesla city out in the desert, and it's like, man, we know how this goes, dude. We have plenty of examples, and
I mean, China's done it a bunch of times, and they always end up being abandoned. Disney is trying to do it.
Yeah, they're trying to do like that mega fan, like gated community thing. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't work out well. Jane Jacobs would cry a lot. Then we transition to I'm going to use quote unquote love triangle. It's only a love triangle in Tim's mind.
Yeah, it's like, I think there's some history there, I think maybe they were sweethearts as like teens or something, maybe.
Or like Bix is always hanging around him, because I think that Cassian is involved in all of the secret underground, like pulling of the things from the ships and like doing the things, right? Whereas Tim is kind of on the up and up, and he isn't aware of this side hustle that Bix has going on, which is obviously for the rebellion, right?
Yeah, right.
That we know, right? We know that because we know where this story is going.
And she knows Luthen, right? I think. So yeah.
That's her contact, and she knows who he is too.
Yeah.
It's not like that. But Tim doesn't know, because she doesn't want to tell him that, but she keeps on doing stuff with Cassian. He is like, I don't mean to say that he's fully right to be jealous, because he's not, right? He shouldn't be jealous. This is just not like a nice character trait, but he should have asked her if he was concerned, and he never does. He never respects her enough to actually ask her.
Yeah, it's kind of like, he knows she's hiding something, and he just kind of thinks, well, like,
I'll just find it out and deal with it myself.
Diego Luna, mega hottie, so I'll just like assume that's what it is. And yeah, he kind of stalks her to the restaurant. I think he asks her to go to dinner, and she says like no, and then of course she's like at a bar or restaurant.
I thought our night was the other night.
Yeah.
I'm busy doing my side hustle.
And then of course she sort of goes to his house, like that cycle of like, she's not really doing anything wrong, but she still feels guilty because she's hiding something. So then she kind of ends up going to Tim's place after the fact.
Then, this is when we start to really heavily shift back and forth between like the past Kainai and what's kind of going on in the present. They really did this a lot in Book of Boba Fett, hey? Like, I was thinking about how similar this feels to Book of Boba Fett.
It's a lot like, it's definitely a lot like Boba Fett, where they're like drawing, threads between like basically two specific points on the timeline, or I guess maybe like 3
back
in
to like
Boba, but
Clone Wars or Republic time, and then they're tying to this other time.
It's
right?
very fluid and organic here, though, and again they're really trusting the audience.
It's not as forced. I would say Book of Boba Fett ended up being kind of forced at different points.
Mm-hmm.
But we get like the kids kind of prepping to go to war.
Yeah.
And they all are getting, their weapons ready, and then they're all sitting down in a circle and painting themselves with paint. I could see how this would not land with people who are of an indigenous population. I could see that not landing well, and I haven't actually had the time to seek out those voices, but I could see it not landing well.
I did wonder if these kids were a little stereotypical, but it wasn't something that necessarily, stuck out like a sore thumb or anything. But yeah, I had that thought too of like, I wonder how this is being handled, how people respond to this. But
it's supposed to be, from what I'm getting the impression of, it's an initiation into adulthood. right? What they're saying is we're going to go and fight this monster. And so only the people that can go. And he tries to join. His sister wants to be with him. One of the kids pushes him away, and then he's able to sit down, in the circle and get his paint applied to go off and be part of this. It's an interesting moment because it's obviously like being led by the head leader girl. And I really was like, oh, this is really a fascinating moment. And I hope that we get more, I don't know, context, but I don't know that we will because he's left Kainai by the end of the 3 episodes. So this is all we get, right? We don't really know what this is.
It felt to me like she was kind of taking notice of him in a little bit of a way, like kind of not flirty, but like she kind of like looks at him appreciatively and he kind of smiles back almost like sort of proud, like happy with himself. Like
he's trying to impress her or something.
Yeah.
And it was more like an older mentor or something, I think.
Okay.
It was interesting. Yeah.
She looks a couple years older, maybe. Yeah.
I definitely got the impression she was 15 or 16, like much older. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are like a couple of characters that are like sort of emphasized in the flashback. One being her, and then one being the sister, obviously.
And then there's a boy that like pushes him away, and he's in there occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Is there a third girl who talks to him, has like spoken lines too, or am I imagining? Maybe that was the boy you're talking about. I don't know.
Remember. Yeah.
I don't remember.
It's hard to tell when they don't actually speak a language that you understand and isn't translated. Like it was a choice to do that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a lot of subtitles, you think? I don't remember.
There was no subtitles for the Kainai language. And
gotcha.
So it was just like you have to kind of just go off body language and intimation of made up language, which is fine. It's very Star Wars. That is a very Star Wars thing to do.
To kind of other them by default and probably for the purpose of some mystery. But yeah, it's kind of, that's strange that we don't know what he said to his sister or anything. That's kind of strange.
Nothing.
Weird. Yeah, I didn't quite pick up on that, but yeah, that's weird that we don't know the specifics yet. Good for mystery, though. Good for mystery, I guess. But yeah, kind of others them a little bit.
It was maybe just to create that feeling of like, you know what happened, but you don't really know what this was about. Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like we said, the adults being gone. Like, there's so much history that we're gonna dig up later. But it's also it could imply that he's lost touch with his heritage, his people, that kind of thing too. This idea that the memory is a little fuzzy for him. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know how much intentionality we're kind of just giving him there, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Then we get the scene where we get Cassie Knows Money and we get Vetch, he just told me to stand all I have to do is just stand here. Oh my God, I love this character so much.
Yes, I love
this
scene.
Interaction.
Yeah.
It taught us a lot, right? Because Cassie Knows Money, a deposit on something, right? So, he's trying to, he took a deposit from somebody. And so he owes a service or a thing to this man, right? Who would pay him the rest, but he hasn't been able to do that. And this man is willing to hire this big guy just to stand behind him. And this big guy's just like, I just stand here. And Cassian calls him out on it. It's just really glorious, which also shows how well Cassian understands other people.
It seemed like we saw some new non-human species in these episodes. I don't know, like specifically, but I felt like perhaps the bartender in the club and perhaps this guy might be species that I haven't seen before. I don't know. I haven't looked into it too deeply because I was just kind of enjoying the show and, try not to get too in the weeds with some of that stuff. But I thought that's nice to see, like, truly, fresh designs, creature effects and stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we get Bix's line to Tim, to go and radio the buyer, which is also cool because it's like, is the radio illegal? Is the untraceable radio illegal? Do more people use this? Because she goes to like the cable parts shop or whatever, right? And it's in the back and they uses the secret thing. And then she goes and climbs the tower and uses the communication device that can communicate with the buyer, who ends up being Luthen.
Yeah.
Right. But he's super jealous and loses her on the way. Being his jealous self.
Yeah. This is when he like runs into people and stuff. Is that this part?
Yeah. Like he runs into the people on the street and then loses her and she goes and does the radio thing, right? And then we get Cassian the next scene and he's like fixing up the ship that he wasn't supposed to borrow but borrowed it.
Yeah.
And then it shows kind of like how well-rounded his character is in so many ways. Like he can fix droids, he can fix ships, he's very good with people, he can sneak onto things and be like incredibly, I don't know, like a spy already, right? Like we get all the kind of like bits of his character that show where he is this special person that the buyer will be interested in.
Yeah, he's detail oriented. He's just kind of a mess, but he kind of needs like a break. He needs some like ground to stand on.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's the end of the first episode, which is wild. And we get the start of the second episode. The kids are all on their way to the crashed ship.
Yeah.
And this is what I wanted to talk about ever so briefly. So they're all following one path, which avoids the mine. And he goes the alternative path to go and look and stare at the mine. And it literally goes from like, the kids are on the living side of the path, and he goes and everything is dead.
Yes.
On the side he goes, right? So this is all like super duper foreshadowing. Right? Yeah. The path that leads him to basically this kind of like imperial mine, or he's going to go to the underworld.
Yeah.
He has to. This is part of this. This is also he's going to be drawn in to the greed and all of that to try and find what he's looking for. He has to go and stare it straight in the eye and be there. And this makes me go and question, like, where is his sister?
Right.
Like, where is she?
Yeah.
What is she doing? Right.
Yeah.
But it's amazing sort of symbolic foreshadowing that we're getting with this.
Yeah. It's sort of like this idea that, things are bad, but if you just sort of keep your head down and work hard and, don't gaze into the abyss, everything's going to work out. But like, he's somebody who says like, no, like I'm not going to stand by while, man-made destruction, destroys the quote unquote world,
And he's like, symbolically, the mine absolutely stands in for the fact that he is one of those rare people that is awake to the destruction that is happening around him.
Yeah.
He sees in a very Matrix sense of the world. You feel there's something wrong. You can feel it like an itch in your brain.
Yeah.
With Neo, right? Like he's one of the people that knows.
Yeah. Yeah. In the Matrix, the metaphor is awakening. You wake up to a higher consciousness. And of course, the droid that we both love so much, B2 Emo, he's like trying to wake him up near the beginning of the show, right? And and the way that he sort of gets closer to succeeding is he starts calling him his true name, which is a very Matrix thing too. Neo versus John Anderson or whatever.
Yeah.
So that idea that within you there are layers of consciousness and
the mind itself has deep layers that you go down into to search and find yourself, right? It's the layers of hell. You have to go into the underworld and you have to follow the path, and at each level there's going to be a piece of you that's going to be stripped away, and who you are deep down in your catabasis, in the lowest part that you're going to be, and then you are reformed from that. And then you are
Yeah.
allowed to be reborn and come back as a better version of yourself. And all of that symbolism straight up in front of our faces. Who got it? This podcast.
It makes me think of like there's a lot of surrealist art and stuff, and I think maybe even like Lower Olympus, maybe paintings of like I don't know, fan art of like Greek mythology and stuff that I've seen on Twitter, even like where you have this like winding weird staircase that just goes down and down and down, and the mind kind of has that staircase quality to it, 100%.
Yeah, it does. And I don't know, you've played the game Hades.
A little bit. I'm bad at it, but I do love it.
Did you ever make it past the first level?
Maybe.
There's 3 levels to Hades, and you
Gotcha.
go into like the Elysian fields, and then you go to the gate, and like you start in the lowest level. And what it is, it's like a winding sort of tower that you slowly move your way up. And psychologically, that is a representation of a change journey. And we're getting the reverse. Like he's almost getting like an omen, like a fair warning. Your journey is to dig deep into the dark side to discover what is really truth.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating stuff symbolically.
Yeah. There's a lot of sort of, Luke, Leia, Han stuff in his character here already, with the just like the sort of call to action and looking for the sibling and
the hero's journey is there. It is already like the first 3 episodes really do represent sort of with this past stuff. It looks like it's like a failed journey, right? Where he tried to go on an adventure, and I'll point out more of the things that he ended up going through this with his Kainai time. He definitely tries to go on an adventure, but he wasn't ready. He had to go back to the beginning, basically. And that's why he's in that ship at the beginning when he gets back from that planet, because like that's where he's like comfortable and it reminds him of home. But it takes something else to force him to go on. Hey, a mentor. Right?
Yep.
Any other thoughts on this like mine moment? I'm obsessed with it.
I mean, it's just, it's like that classical composition of like the heroic figure looking out over like the ocean or whatever, that painting that we see again and again, with...
We get it in Dune with Paul Atreides staring out over the ocean before he has to leave. We get Luke staring out binary suns. Something is changing. Something will change. This is that feeling of uneasiness with the community that you exist in, that something must change.
Yeah. Link in Breath of the Wild, like, gonna leave the plateau, or
exactly.
Kylo deciding to become Ben, like all that stuff of we've got a threshold that we're gonna
and sometimes you see the threshold from really, really far away, and sometimes you don't. Right? Even if it's a metaphorical threshold. So then we go back to Ferrix and we get this amazing scene with the clock tower type. It's like a manual clock tower with a guy who is sort of, like in a tradition it feels like some sort of ritual to like, he's like a blacksmith who's like, this is the end of the day. And now it's time to put our tools away.
It's a little blacksmithy, or, you might call him a percussionist, like a musician. Yeah, he takes it very seriously. And it is ritualistic, whether he thinks of himself as like a, just somebody doing a job or a musician. Like it's definitely that kind of, this is an important thing he does. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's tied to the culture of the community, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this concept that he is like the thing that helps them end the day and also begin the day, right? Like it's really cool. I want to learn more. We might never get more, and that's okay too. It's just this really beautiful thing that they've added to the world.
He made me think instantly of the guitarist in Mad Max Fury Road, You know, we don't really need to know like all the why and the history and stuff, but it's there because, we can feel that it's there. It's like it rings true. It's just the fireworks in the Shire or all the weird shit in Dune. Dune is full of it. It just, when you do something kind of quirky in a fantasy setting, it either rings true or it doesn't. And like this guy is just like so perfect.
And they spend moments with like the father and son who are like wrapping up. They see a dude, he's like counting his money, or like people are going and doing their thing.
Yeah.
Like it's just like a really beautiful world building. It's just great. And we get a shot of Marva in the home, kind of speaking with B in like, don't say anything. And oh my God, I'm obsessed with this mother that we have.
She's great.
Fiona Shaw, I have been obsessed with for many years.
She's
most well known from Harry Potter.
Okay, I thought so.
Yes, as Harry's aunt.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew her as a small child from 3 Men and a Little Lady.
Oh, nice. I'll have to Google this. I don't know if I'm familiar or not.
She plays the evil school marm who's trying to take the little girl away from the three dads to go to a boarding school because the mom is getting married to a British guy before she discovers that she's actually in love with somebody else.
Gotcha.
One of the dads.
Nice.
Wasn't Steve Guttenberg. It was Tom Selleck. She's in love with Tom Selleck.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
in the end. And Fiona Shaw played the school marm. And like, she doesn't look like she's aged a day. I don't know what that says about her. Back then, like when the movie was released in later 1990 for 3 Men and a Little Lady.
Yeah, some people just look the same age forever. It's kind of funny how that happens.
But yeah, no, she's amazing. And the fight that they have after it's discovered, like she's like, oh, read him the bulletin. B has to read Cassie in the bulletin. The fight they have is so real. Like, who did you tell? Who did you tell? Oh, we told family. Those guys are families. Like, I only told trusted people too. Like, oh
yeah, just the kind of like sassy but respectful way that he kind of like, that fires back with like, I don't remember exactly the dialogue, but yeah, it's so good. Just like, I told the people I can trust. Well, I only told the people I can trust. And like,
but what about your women? Cassie gets it on.
That's such a like, I don't know, just like a typical British mother-son kind of like Pink Floyd The Wall thing, like, oh, those dirty women gonna take you away from me or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But we get the quickly, not enough time to fight because Bix is looking for you, Cassian, because you got to get this deal going. And of course, Tim, who doesn't trust her, follows her to the bar, sees the meetup, but then still ends up having her show up later. I wrote down, Tim, you rat bastard. And then I said, but sex in my Star Wars?
It's like a genuinely, like, it's a romantically lit and like, you got like this like long lingering kiss and like just so it's sort of like we know
what they did.
Again, just the way she takes off her jacket and stuff. It's very like, wow, okay, like this is for a different audience than perhaps some other Star Wars has been.
This can happen in my Star Wars? Okay. Yeah.
What did Leia and Han do on that ship? No, anyway.
It was a good fade to black. It was great.
Yeah, it was well done.
And of course, we've already talked about our good friend Linus Musk and, but his whole introduction and like how much of like kind of a suck up he is.
Yeah.
To Cyril.
I love all the like Irish and Scottish accents, It reminded me of there was like that great like viral anecdote about, I don't remember the specifics, but I think Diego Luna had talked to somebody who had watched Rogue One with his father, and the father like broke down crying because it's like this guy in Star Wars has my accent, that kind of. So I don't know. It's just kind of cool that they're like, we're going to keep that going where we're like, here's a Scottish guy,
It's not just all high British accents for the Imperials.
British and Americans,
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to see.
Super cool. Yeah. We get back to the flashback. So it really goes back and forth between the flashbacks and the action of the present day. And we get the Kainai kids. We get the Kainai kids who are, in a way, they kind of feel like they're on their way to go fight a dragon. Like it gives me that vibe. But it ends up not being a dragon. It ends up being humans with guns. And I'm confused as whether they were separatists or Republic people.
Yeah.
At one point, Marva says his friends killed a Republic person, a Republic officer.
It's a little messy, but the guy who kills the child has a CIS separatist insignia on his outfit.
Oh.
And I believe, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty positive. And then she's like, there's a Republic frigate en route, and that's that's like the threat. So I think that they are aware. I think the writers were aware that Cassian, like, his backstory is supposed to be that he was like a separatist at one point. And so I think they're kind of like laying the groundwork to justify like why he would have separatist sympathies at one point. And then again, I don't know if that's like, what age that was supposed to be, if he's like late 30s now and that was like, when he was 20, or I'm not sure, but this is 14 years out from Revenge of the Sith, basically, right? Something like that. So I imagine there'll be a lot more flashbacks as we go along.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely was tripped up by, I was like, is this like an early Imperial? Like, how old is this guy? But I was like, I think that is the separatist insignia from like episode 3. And I looked it up and it looks pretty much the same to me. So.
Yeah. I think also that somebody mentions that there was like an Imperial accident there too at some point, like on Kainai. And I'm like, that's okay. I don't need all the answers now. I really don't. It's just more like, I was a little confused, but I also know they'll clarify because they seem to be very, very smart. So it's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I wouldn't be surprised too if like that whole incident was supposed to be like, okay, like roughly the same time as like the Battle of Coruscant in episode 3 and all that, thematically, if that wouldn't surprise me, I guess.
Yeah. And then we get Luthen's entrance, which he obviously seems like a cool dude / badass, what's really interesting is like he looks like he's carrying a walking stick, right? But it looks like an old school lightsaber that they used to do before, like in A New Hope. It looks like that.
Yeah, it definitely, there was a moment where he was walking with it and I was like, yeah, that looks like the saber that like Obi-Wan held when they were filming or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like the behind the scenes.
Yeah, like upside down. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that an interesting choice?
Yeah. Probably deliberate, maybe.
It feels deliberate.
Somebody just was like, oh, it'd be kind of funny if it was like this, and they just ran with it.
We're trying to indicate that this is the mentor coming.
Yeah, it really looks like A New Hope Obi-Wan's saber, the Alec Guinness. Yeah.
But like with the like stick part that they used to actually do the fight scenes.
Yeah, like solid, the solid blade.
The solid metal that they would use, right?
Yeah. And even his hair is kind of...
I mean, Stellan Skarsgård is just awesome. So we're...
Yeah, it feels like an illustration of like Alec Guinness Obi-Wan's hairstyle and like...
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's... he's wearing a robe and... It's funny that this is the first time Skarsgård has been in Star Wars, honestly. It feels like he should have been here at some point by now, so...
But it also feels like he adds a lot of gravitas, sort of like having Werner Herzog. He adds a lot of like, I mean, that scene where he's, I mean, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but that's okay. We're with Willie and him on the like transport, and they have this like very like My question is like Tony Gilroy is very aware of the types of fans. Like, I think he has an article where he's like, or an interview where he's like, oh, I'm very aware that people think that these are the types of fans that Star Wars has. But I want you to know we would like other fans. It's kind of interesting because like this is not the traditional fare that people would talk about Star Wars as being.
Yeah, it feels like a broadening of the scope a little bit. Yeah, like
just this random conversation that is in so many ways establishing the city for us from an outside perspective, and also Luthen as a character. With the guy who's in propellants, that's what he says. I'm in propellants. He's like going there to buy propellants.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
And his end line is, if you can't find it here, you can't find it anywhere.
Are we talking about the guy in the green outfit whose name's like Salmon? Okay, yeah.
No. Willie. No. His name is Willie.
Oh,
his name is Willie, and he's got a hat, and he's got like his little suitcases next to him on the transport, and he has this full conversation with Luthen.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's a lot of stuff happens, so I'm a little blurry on this one.
I know, but it's just like, why have that? Like, they just took the time to have this like 3-minute conversation.
Right. You're talking about the little like kindly gentleman who's like, they get you coming and going. Yeah.
They get you. Sorry. You have to pay, and then you had to take the transport. And we used to be able to go up. I mean, it's establishing the getaway. Later.
Yeah. It's really good. Just kind of establishing the world and kind of how people regard their situation from like a
it's like, oh, the world has changed. I'm a sales guy or I'm a buyer, but like it's got a little bit of like I'm maybe we'll come back to it.
In my notes, I put
jumped ahead.
No, it's okay. It took me a while to figure out exactly what scene you're talking about, but no, in my notes,
just establishing Luthen, like it, you know,
his temperament, how he kind of guards himself. Because, this is a guy who has a lot of mundane working class rage, I think is the term that I put in my notes. This is a guy who's very angry, but he's kind of accepting of like, man, this is a bunch of, BS. And Luthen, by contrast, is a guy who's like presumably out there fighting the good fight, a true believer, is, laying down his life to stop the Empire. But he's kind of like, he's not going to talk about it in the same way. That's a fun contrast.
This interaction reminded me a little bit of Mole Man in the Mole Man in Kenobi. Like, we are going to interact with a real human or a real thing that is just a dude.
This show's doing a really good job of that, for sure.
Sorry, I jumped ahead because I wanted to ask about if this was more establishment for Luthen's character before we really get to know him with the Cassian conversation, because they don't really have a lot of time to establish him before the Cassian interaction. Right?
Yeah. So far, he's sort of a mystery man, but we sort of know what his deal is, but it's just... Yeah, we don't know anything about him. He's just sort of a contrast to everyone else. Which is fun.
Okay, back to Bix and Tim.
Sure.
Who, in the morning, he's like looking at her.
Yeah.
Couldn't sleep.
Yeah, couldn't sleep. And
probably feeling guilty.
Yeah.
Things he's done. And she asks for Calf, which is the most absolute... I love when Calf is pulled out in universe and they brought it into the live action. Has it ever been in live action before?
I don't know that they've said the word calf in live action before now. It stuck out to me, and I just liked how like
it's a morning after calf too, Alex.
The post-coital coffee. But just kind of the way he's like, oh, it's just about to put it on, and he's like in his socks. Like, this is so just like nuts and bolts. This is very reminiscent of like Han with like the toddler Ben in Last Shot, where he's just kind of chilling, doing like mundane like living room stuff where they're not talking about Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader. They're just kind of people living their lives, and they're like both wrestling with this weird guilt over different, like she's hiding her probable like rebel ties, and he's like, oh, I was kind of like stalking my girlfriend because I don't trust her. And yeah, I don't know. It's weird. He's a likable character, and yet he does all these like wrong things. I guess kind of like Cassian, kind of. Obviously, very different. One's like a snitch, and the other is the guy who stole the Death Star plans. So I'm not equating them, but
yep. I don't know. Stuff. It's a great scene. It's more of this in Star Wars, small moments with characters that make them feel whole. Huge.
Yeah. Huge. People took notice of the socks. They're like, oh, there are socks in Star Wars, which is funny.
There's no bras though.
No bras.
That's George Lucas canon.
Yeah.
And then we get B and Cassian, and this really adorable scene where Cassian is super worried.
Yeah. Make sure that she keeps the heat on. She gets cold and all this stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So good. And how B is like, give me the credits that you have put aside for her. Like, she needs money. It's just like, again, like these are like real problems. It feels very real, every aspect of it. Yeah, you talked about mention of a deposit that so we don't know what that is, right? No. Yeah, I wonder. It's a deposit that guy had given Cassian for something because he wanted his deposit back. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and then we immediately cut to Marva, who's looking for B. He's like, hurry back to her. She'll be looking. And then she wanders into Cassian's room, which is, it's a beautiful, like written cut to the past where we see how she enters into Cassian's life shortly thereafter. Sure. Right? Yeah. We get this nice setup with her looking at this like, thing he's had since he was taken away from his home. Yeah. She was a scavenger, right? That was kind of the implication, which is kind of a fun callback. We get more scavenger fun stuff, right? Yeah. Yeah. And she's sort of like reminiscing about finding him and all of that. That's the impression that we get, although we don't get that really answered until later, except for that we see the leader dies. Oh, yeah. And in that moment, right? Yeah, the guy just sort of wakes up and starts shooting. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, there's a lot of craziness. Bunch of kids, I better start shooting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cassian goes and books his way off the planet, also plans to leave money for his mom, I assume, from the sale of the box that he has, the Imperial thingy. Yeah, Star Path unit. Yeah. Kind of a fun name. It's like a MacGuffin in a way. I don't know that we'll find out what it is. He says something to Luthen about like it can trace Imperial coordinates. So as like maybe, like when they're not in hyperspace, it can like detect ship signatures or something, right. Maybe. But yeah, it's still just kind of vague. Yeah. And that kind of like, we see the, company police come after him. We sort of see that all set up, or they're getting ready to go. And we see kind of this setup for the third episode, right? So originally these 2 episodes were supposed to be released the first week. I totally agree with having 3. The third one, it completes the arc really well. Yeah. So we move on to the third episode because we were already talking about Luthen entering the city, although they do have a really cute interaction at the end where he's heading off on his way to the city and he's like, are you going to stay at the hotel? He's like, not tonight. He's like, yeah, that's how they get you, or, smartest decision or whatever. It's just like a really cute thing between Willie and Luthen. Oh, on the transport. Right at the end, yeah, when they arrive. Okay, so we start out and Casa enters the ship. So symbolically, because we're talking about his like past adventure. Yeah. He is entering into a threshold. He's going into the belly of the whale. Yeah. And visually it's very similar to like Baby Jyn Erso, like hiding and waiting for Saw Gerrera. I feel like that shot in Rogue One, very similar, but yeah, it's sort of this dark tunnel.
Underworld-esque because when he arrives, he sees nothing but dead bodies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And he just starts to destroy the reflective surfaces because he sees his face.
Yeah. It's sort of, it's like that sort of glossy imperial texture you would see on like the Death Star, but all the screens are going haywire. You know, it's kind of, there's this theme so far of like with the mining, the giant mining drill or whatever you want to call that thing, the big mining machine outside that's like laying there sort of dead. This idea of like, you know, machinery and industry is not progress. Like it actually breaks down, you know, it's like, you know, which again, if we're talking about like the Death Star and machinery, you know, this is all leading toward the guy who blows that shit up. So basically, or paves the road for that to happen.
What I find super fascinating about the reflective surface for him, though, is that's where, you know, the show Black Mirror.
Oh, right. That's the director, right? Worked on that, I think.
I
think Haynes. Sorry, yeah.
But Black Mirror, what a Black Mirror is when you see a screen and you see yourself in the reflection of a turned off screen.
Oh, okay.
That's a Black Mirror.
Gotcha.
And because it's not quite clear, it's not a clear mirror. It's this weird technology-driven faux reflection.
Sure.
And he sees himself in this like Black Mirror.
Very cool. Yeah, it's sort of like this phantom version of yourself.
Yeah, because it's the underworld, spiritually and symbolically. So he's totally dead, symbolically.
Yeah, because he's like left his sister, and like the implication is like, don't worry, I'll be back. And then he doesn't, you know, he gets whisked away to whatever wonderland,
other places. And he voluntarily chooses, like the rest of the people take the leader and go back to where they came from. Right, and he's like, nah, I'm past this threshold.
Yeah, he's got some kind of something compels him, and then
there's a cut where he's smashing the mirror and things are falling down, and it cuts to Ferrix, and this giant piece of scrap is being sliced off a giant ship, and like cords are being pulled out of the inside of a ship.
Oh, his buddy who like covers for him, like that he devises the alibi with. Yeah. So it's Brasso, right? But this is the cut. So they're saying, and this is important. This is like underworld's regeneration. Ferrix is like where ships go to die. Like the crashed ship that was on the planet that he's from might have ended up in Ferrix to be sliced up and salvaged and resold, because death always leads to rebirth. Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So he is in a dead state when he is in Ferrix. And when he chooses to leave with Luthen, or whenever that happens in a future episode, he will be on a path to being reborn and finding his true self.
Yeah. And they're doing this thing where he has to borrow his buddy's like employer's ship, right? Every time he wants to go off world. And so it's like,
so he's not really going.
Yeah, he needs like his own ship, would be like symbolic of like true freedom, which I don't know what that's gonna. He ends up with that U-wing eventually, right? So
yeah, he does. Then we get sort of the security forces arriving. They arrive in a bigger ship, and then they all get on to drop ships that look like advanced versions of the Clone Wars drop ships.
Yeah, they do. They have that same exact shape. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. And they seem smaller, but maybe they aren't. They're like around the same size. They fit like 5 to 6 people in one.
Yeah. You've got like, they're sort of hanging off the ship like in little different angles, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like they took that design of the Clone Wars gunship and made it like flatter and grayer to be like more imperial or something.
Yeah, or just like, a corporation bought this design and like made it more corporate.
Yeah.
Something like that. Oh, interesting designs happening. We get Marva's entrance with Bee and her friend, and they're like scavenging, and they sort of like are around the ship in the past. And that's paired with Marva being captured, as the corporate forces arrive on the planet. And a lot is happening all at once. Like Luthen arrives and has the conversation with Bix. And it's like Luthen kind of points out that he's kind of more interested in Cassian in that conversation. And I really liked that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely got that from like the later part too, but yeah, I'd have to go back and watch that conversation with Bix. But I like that the line too, and this might even be in the second episode, but there's that line about the best way to keep a sword sharp is to like use it, like basically this very real world statement about just like cops using authority.
Right.
Like they're going to seek out violence more than some, quote unquote, like criminal is going to do, like this idea that people with power and authority are going to abuse it. And that's just, and they can't get enough of it. And so in episode 3, we're just sort of seeing that gun go off, and it just kind of, these guys, they like love the idea of like going off to war and
It's sort of like how rich people will do ride-alongs with cops.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? Like,
yeah,
these guys are all just like plain power.
Yeah, and like as soon as they're actually in danger of any kind, like they're total cowards and just like, oh, we're under siege. They're all around us. Like, what? And they say like, oh, there's a crowd gathering. Like, better leave 2 guards, not just 1. Like they're terrified of like everyday working class people just kind of like watching them,
Yeah, absolutely. And we get this like really amazing moment where like Cassian's love of Marva and concern actually indicates where he is, because B has the communicator.
Yeah.
And it's like, like make sure she turns on the heat, and B, can you hear me? Like, it's just, oh, Cassian.
So good.
So good. And we end up getting the like interaction with Luthien and Cassian set up this place specifically so he can, have the advantage, and he's hiding away, and Luthien's like just calls him out like, I know everything.
Yeah. I know everything about you. And he talks about like his father being executed, and I was like, I didn't know if maybe that was like Marva's partner, or if it was like his dad on. More likely, it was his dad on Kainai, and we're gonna get like a whole bunch more of his childhood story at some point.
Yeah,
but,
I think they'll go back further, maybe before that time that we saw.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Like they'll go back further in the past.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like, yeah, to get a little of like his relationship with his sister, and then dig into that stuff with his dad and what that was all about. Maybe justify why he might be against like the Republic rather than the Separatists. Or I did love that it was like an abandoned factory, again, to drive home that thing of like, industry not actually always paying off, and inevitably
like rusted engines or something hanging from the roof.
Yeah. It's just that symbol of like the destroyed, abandoned mine again, just kind of reinforced. And also, doesn't Tarkin, when Jeddah City is destroyed, doesn't Tarkin say like, we'll just say that it was a mining incident or something? Like,
yeah.
So that's kind of like an interesting callback, but sorry, I'm all over the place there, but I really love kind of like the chess game that they play, and Luthen's like, I'm way smarter than you. Beep, 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 beep. And then he's like, see, you're carried a comm. Yeah. Never carry anything you don't control. And he starts to give him these rules. And this is how we know he is the mentor to Cassian. He's literally starting to already teach him, even though they're like interacting kind of in this semi like way. But it's quickly like
he quickly turns it on Cassian and really shows, I wasn't looking for the weird Imperial box. Special people are hard to find. Tell me how you did this.
Yeah.
And Cassian's answer is just really so wonderful. And it ties back to that mind symbolism. He can see it for what it is, right?
Yeah, he says you just walk in like you belong.
Yeah. And they're so blind. They're so fat. They can't even imagine somebody like me would do that.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful. Like, it's smart writing. Ha!
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, he says
good stuff.
A comment about like spitting in their food, and you like don't know if it's literal
spitting
or
in their
figurative,
food.
but it's great either way.
It's great stuff, but it, like that relationship is already building. Like Luthen is seeking him out in a Luke Skywalker-ish way, right? Like like that's the best example of a hero who is needing a mentor, is that, Obi-Wan also knew everything about Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Right? Like these guys, these old wizards are the mentor, always knows way more about the world and your place in it. And they walk in and they're like, I'll be your guide for this first bit.
Yeah. Yep.
They're always like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that the rule is like, don't trust your smartphone, basically. Like,
yeah.
So good.
It's so good. And through the, oh no, they're surrounding us. And then they start fighting and doing the fight in the hangar or warehouse or whatever, right? Cassian keeps on trying to go back for the box. And Luthen's like, the box isn't important. You were important, right? Like, it's, like it's like that, but the boon, the sacred boon to show I've actually earned my way off of this planet. But the secret thing that Luthen's trying to show him is that he always had the skills to get off the planet, to get out, to go on his adventure.
Yeah, there's this like interesting thing where, how do I know it's like genuine and valuable? And his answer is, it's pristine. And then, of course, like debris like falls on it, and which echoes what you're saying. Like this idea that you don't want to be pristine, you want to go on an adventure and take the toy out of the box or whatever metaphor.
Take the toy out of the box. Yes, so, in a big Star Warsian way, it's not the toy that matters. It's what's inside that counts.
Yeah.
Right? This has always been my big fight with the marketing and the like toy-ness of Star Wars, is I always wanted to see a Jedi Master who refused to use a lightsaber and would only use a stick.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Who could fight a lightsaber with a stick, right? Like the idea that you are so with the Force, you don't need a lightsaber.
I love Attack of the Clones more than a lot of people, but I always felt like Yoda having a lightsaber was a little bit kind of undid that thing that you just said.
Yeah, whatever that thing is, yeah.
Because I totally agree. Yeah. I totally agree that Yoda never needed a lightsaber. And so as the guy who, when I was 12 years old, Attack of the Clones was just the best thing that ever happened, I was like, I just don't really like the part where Yoda uses a lightsaber. That was my complaint about that movie, not anything else. So that's kind of funny.
Yoda had lots of flaws. Come and fight me.
I guess he probably made a bad call or two along the way. Yeah, he kind of did.
And then they run off, and at this time we're getting the Tim and Bix. Bix is getting captured, and he tries to save her, and he's like, "Oh no, the fruit of all of my terrible decisions."
Reaping and sowing. Oh no, yeah. I called the cops, and the cops are here doing things that cops do. Oh shit,
oh no.
Yeah.
Again, like anti-cop messaging all over the
yes.
place.
Yes.
Wild. But Bix is of course, it's a great scene because she's super broken up about Tim, and of course realized he had done the bad thing as she was trying to save Cassian. And then we get Luthen and Cassian trying to choose out a speeder, which felt weirdly reminiscent to Anakin and Obi-Wan's speeder conversations in Attack of the Clones.
Sure, yeah.
You know? But then they end up doing the like very smart diversion because Luthen always comes with bombs, apparently. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that always have an escape plan thing, which is... He doesn't say that, but that is a line that Q says in like The World's Not Enough, which is, you know, brings us back to that whole James Bond, Jason Bourne thing.
Well, he does. He said always secure your exit is one of the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they do more Q callbacks, I'll be very happy.
There's Bond in this, hey?
There is
Bond.
a little
I'm
bit.
Good. There's a little bit. Yeah, I'm happy about that. But that kind of wraps up the episode because they're heading off towards the wastelands on the, you know, classic swoop bike. But wow, what a way to set up a show.
I'm very impressed. It definitely, you know, I really enjoyed Obi-Wan. I quite enjoyed Boba Fett, but this show is something that you can just recommend to people, and it's not like, well, you like Star Wars, so you like this. It's kind of just like, no, this is a fun show, and like you will like this probably, like, you know, which is clever.
Yeah, exactly. It gives an intro to the world that doesn't require any foreknowledge.
Yeah.
It's very smart. And I am looking forward to covering the rest of this show with you, Alex.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
I don't think so. I love these characters. I love the story they're telling so far, and they're tackling some really tricky subjects and saying tricky things that so far have been handled really well. And I don't know. I'm just having a good time with it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in and listening to our very, very fun discussion about Andor episodes 1, 2, and 3. Come back next week. We will be talking about the 4th episode, and we look forward to you tuning in then. Alex, where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Mostly on like Twitter at Alex J. Kane, Kane, and I'm on like, Letterboxd, things like that. So usatoday.com occasionally.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Look forward to you tuning in next week. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is provided by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force. Cheryl, Melody, Night Huntress, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Joe Allen D, Christian Luca, Josh Johnson, Scott C, and Susan. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. Check out our other channel on YouTube, What the Fiction. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, and our website, whattheforce.ca. We also have a Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.